Now, when it comes to boot space, the Toyota Landcruiser Prado, it just takes a shocking step backwards, and it then proceeds to take several more steps backwards, increasing its pace before eventually falling off a cliff and exploding into a ball of admittedly reliable flames. But now that we know that water and the 48-volt mild hybrid system are literally incompatible with each other, yeah, it does make a difference. But what about the Ford Everest? Often cited as being unreliable, is it unreliable? Off-road drive modes, which adjust the traction and stability systems for various terrains, well, they're only available on the Prado from the VX trim upwards, leaving the GX and GXL trims unnecessarily neutered by what is literally software they have already developed and could put in the car. It's honestly a frankly shitty approach, Toyota. The Toyota Landcruiser Prado has long been the default option for Aussies wanting a 7-seater that can tackle everything from school runs to rugged outback adventures. But I recently reviewed the 250 series Landcruiser Prado, and in that video, I called it the most disappointing car of the year back in 2024. Why? Well, I'll link that video down below, but in summary, it makes some crazy compromises versus the old 150 series Prado while raising prices by at least $10,000. Toyota's banking on retro-inspired styling, a new hybrid approach, and a sizable price jump to keep it ahead of the competition. Thing is, the competition has never been stronger, and the 2025 Ford Everest is proof of that. It's got a gutsy V6, impressive refinement, and plenty of modern tech, all at a price point that puts the heat right back on Toyota. But then again, when the new Everest launched, it had a few bugs with its tech, freezing and disconnecting, and even some unique issues that my press cars had. So it has certainly had its fair share of issues. In this video, we're going to compare these two heavyweights on every front: exterior design, interior comfort, drivetrains, towing and payload, on-road and off-road manners, overall value, practicality, and yes, even reliability concerns that may or may not sway your final decision. Along the way, I'll be brutally honest about what I love and hate in each SUV, because as good as they both are in some areas, there's no such thing as a perfect vehicle. I'll also tell you, for every category, who wins. By the end of this video, you'll know whether Toyota's legendary badge is worth the compromises or if Ford's all-rounder approach makes the Everest the smarter buy. Round 1. Reliability. Now, you might think that Toyota wins hands down here, but unfortunately, that just isn't true. The new mild hybrid system was added to Toyota's 2.8-litre turbo diesel D4D engine and was introduced into the Toyota Hilux first. It has a number of benefits, but was brought in for one big reason: emissions. Diesels can be dirty, and we have NVES coming up, which means that manufacturers have to make cleaner cars, at least if they want to sell them in Australia and not get fined. And so this 48-volt mild hybrid with a 4.3 amp-hour lithium-ion battery is designed to take load off of the engine to run accessories like air conditioning and electronics. It also adds some power to the drivetrain. The 2.8-litre turbo diesel 4-cylinder, it puts out the same power as the 150 series Prado with the same engine, 150 kilowatts and 500 newton-meters. But of course, now it has a small electric motor, and that runs as an integrated starter generator, and that outputs just 8.4 kilowatt of power and 65 newton meters of little torque. Now, before Toyota added this mild hybrid technology to this engine, it has been famously reliable, but with one very infamous problem, and that comes back to emissions. It has a DPF, or diesel particulate filter, and pretty much every new diesel engine has one of those fitted, by the way. This DPF, it blocks engine nasties coming out of the exhaust, and when it gets full, the engine, it runs a cleaning cycle and it burns those particulates caught. However, Toyota had a DPF clogging issue, which has actually led to a class action lawsuit, and compensation has been provided to owners of affected vehicles. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know all of the facts of this case, but it's never a good look when you have a company like Toyota fighting back and appealing these lawsuits. Still, these issues have since been fixed on all of the engines built from May 2020 onwards, which is diesel under the bridge. Am I right? The other two relatively common issues with the 1GD FTV engines are timing chains and EGR coolers. The timing chains can actually stretch over time, leading to poor engine performance, rattling noises, or even severe engine damage if they are left unaddressed. And regular inspection and replacement, typically around 150,000 kilometers or sooner, that can help prevent further issues. Meanwhile, EGR coolers, they're prone to cracking or leaking, which can result in coolant loss, overheating, or contamination of the exhaust system. Installing an aftermarket catch can and inspecting the EGR cooler periodically can help mitigate these risks and again extend the system's lifespan. Now, that might sound like a lot of issues, but honestly, these are actually just preventable with good and regular maintenance. However, the real issue is this. My friend Fian over at CarSauce recently off-roaded a Prado and then it died. After some diagnosis, it turns out the mild hybrid battery compartment flooded while he was wading through water. And that's because where the battery lives, which is a stupid place for it, as you'll see soon, it has a cooling fan inlet and air outlet. Some water got in and it just bricked the car. And that is not good enough, especially considering water wading is an extremely common off-road scenario in Australia. And if it can't wade at up to its claimed 700 millimeters of depth, something is very wrong. So Toyota, this needs to be urgently fixed. But what about the Ford Everest? Often cited as being unreliable. Is it unreliable? Well, this is an interesting one. You see, the Ford Everest, it comes with a choice of two engines. It's got a 2-liter 4-cylinder bi-turbo diesel with 154 kilowatt of power and 500 newton meters of torque. And then there is my personal pick, the 3-liter V6 turbo diesel with 184 kilowatt of power and 600 newton meters of torque. Now, I've previously written an article on our website, CarSauce.com, about the Ford Everest reliability, and I'll link that down below. But that was almost 2 years ago. And so I think I need to update this. So I did. I went onto Facebook owners groups for the Everest and asked them about their issues. At launch, we did have an issue with our press car where the mode selector dial just wouldn't work. That's the 4-wheel drive selector as well. So that kind of sucked. Then a few months later, we had another press car that had a handbrake fault. Don't know why. And then there were the micro stutters and disconnections that I experienced when I was using Apple CarPlay, which would just cut out the music for milliseconds at a time, but it happened so often, it was annoying as f. Now, will these impact the way that the car drives? Of course not. None of them did, except for the 4-wheel drive selector. But they certainly made me frustrated. And to Ford's credit, they have since released software updates fixing those micro stuttering issues. And of course, they got back to me and both of those faults were replaced in those press cars. Now, when I went onto these Facebook owners groups, I did stumble upon 2 different posts from owners whose V6 engines had randomly exploded, figuratively speaking. However, based on the comments on these, it seemed to be pretty isolated issues and not widespread. Of course, any new car is going to have issues straight from the factory. Sometimes you get a lemon and that does suck. But when I asked the question, has anyone had issues? Posting under Jacob's account. Thank you, Daddy Jacob. So far, the 2-liter bi-turbo, it's not reporting any common issues, and it's that simple. The 3-liter V6 did have glow plug issues between 2020 and 2021, which could lead to difficulties starting the engine, especially in cold conditions, and in some cases, internal engine damage if the plugs failed entirely. But Ford has apparently fixed this for all 2022 builds onward. So yeah, reliability for Ford owners has actually been very good, especially for the 4-cylinder. Now, of course, this will upset some Toyota fanboys, but I'm gonna have to give this reliability winner here right now to the Everest, at least until Toyota can fix the 48-volt mild hybrid flooding issue. That's just not good enough. Round 2. How they look. Believe it or not, the way that a car looks is one of the biggest reasons that people will choose to buy a car over any other car in Australia. Now, you can let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below, but I think the Prado is one sexy looking SUV. Monique, my fiance, loved it too, and she's part of the target demographic of this car. You see a lot of younger females driving these around. Specifically, she loved its big and boxy Land Rover Defender-esque design. Personally, I think that the Prado nails the old school FJ Cruiser-esque vibe. It's boxy, it's got those big power bulges on the bonnet. I love the heritage Toyota lettering across the grille. It definitely looks ready to get dusty from day one. And in terms of size, the Prado measures, well, pretty big. 4,925 millimeters in length, 1,980 millimeters in width, 1,870 millimeters in height, and it rides on a 2,850 millimeter wheelbase, the same as the Landcruiser 300 series, which it shares the TNGA F platform with. The Everest is marginally only shorter at just 4,914 millimeters, but it is noticeably wider at 2,207 millimeters, something you will definitely pick up on in tighter lanes and car parks. It also boasts a slightly longer wheelbase of 2,900 millimeters, which can mean more interior stretch for passengers, and it stands at 1,842 millimeters tall. So which one looks better? Well, of course, that is subjective. If you love a modern truck-based design with a broad stance, the Everest might be up your alley. But if you prefer a retro, boxy silhouette reminiscent of Toyota's heritage, the Prado honestly delivers on that in spades. Either way, both have serious on-road presence, they just take different paths to get there. Still, winner for me is clear, Prado. Round 3, interior. Moving on to the interior, the Prado and the Everest both have their strengths, but also some key differences, especially in practicality and comfort. Starting with the Prado, Toyota has made big strides in modernizing the cabin. The overall design is clean and functional, with a 12.3-inch touchscreen at the center of the dash, supporting wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The interface is quick and easy to use, and Toyota honestly deserves credit for retaining physical dials for the mind-blowingly powerful climate controls, making adjustments intuitive even while driving. The seats are trimmed in synthetic leather, which feels premium and durable. Both the front and second rows offer good support and comfort. Kind of. The back seats have a little bit of plastic that dug into me. And yes, the second row seats in the Prado do recline. This adds welcome adjustability, especially for passengers on longer drives. But while the Prado does make some strides, it's not without flaws. Storage space is barely okay. A material choice can feel cheap and nasty, especially lower in the cabin. There's no lumbar support even on the GXL grade that we reviewed, and that is totally unacceptable at its very high price point. And don't worry, more on pricing very soon. But build quality is also just questionable, with some of the worst tin sounding doors you'll hear in a modern car. Take a listen. It's not great. Some of the buttons as well, they just shake around so much. It's weird. The second row also may recline, but the seats don't slide forward or backward, which limits flexibility for balancing legroom in the third row and is a limitation of the TNGA-F platform. The third row seats are where the Prado does just okay. Due to the raised floor from the mild hybrid battery pack, footroom is really bad, like really bad. And even kids may struggle on longer trips. And while Toyota provides rear air vents and charging ports, the compromised space means that the third row feels a little bit more like an afterthought, to be honest. Now, over to the Everest, which nails practicality and comfort. Ford has prioritized versatility, and it shows, especially in the second row seats, which both slide and recline. This makes it easy to customize the seating layout for passenger comfort or to create more room for the third row access. The third row in the Everest is also a step up from the Prado. It offers better legroom, headroom, and overall comfort. While it's still definitely best suited for kids or smaller adults, it's far more usable than the cramped space you will find in the Prado, thanks 48-volt mild hybrid. The Everest continues to shine in terms of materials and tech too. The cabin, it just feels more premium, with soft touch surfaces in key areas and very supportive seats. Its 12-inch infotainment display is packed with features, it runs smoothly, although it didn't, admittedly, when it first came out. And the combination of physical buttons and touch controls strike a good balance. Not to mention, you get a split glove box and pop-out dash cup holders, which makes it infinitely more practical than the Prado, which for whatever reason, you can't really even use the glove box. So while the Prado has definitely improved significantly with a modernized cabin, its lack of storage space up front, sliding second row functionality, and a tight third row, it just holds it back. The Everest, on the other hand, it delivers a more versatile, family-friendly cabin with sliding and reclining second row seats, a more comfortable third row, and an overall premium feel. Despite the massive improvements of the Prado, Everest wins here. Round 4, how do they drive? Let's dive into how these SUVs perform on the road, and this is where their engineering philosophies really shine or falter. Starting with the Prado, it's clear Toyota designed it with comfort in mind. The suspension is soft and compliant, which makes it great for absorbing bumps and rough surfaces, providing a cushy and relaxed ride over less than perfect roads. However, the suspension softness becomes a major drawback on Australian roads, where high-speed handling is often tested. The Prado struggles to maintain composure when driven with any sort of pace, particularly on winding or uneven surfaces. The soft setup results in significant body roll through corners and a tendency to understeer heavily when pushed. The steering feels light and detached, it offers little feedback, which doesn't inspire much confidence for any sort of spirited driving, which may be required on Australian back roads. So while it is a comfortable cruiser, pun intended, for long distance travel or low speed urban use, the Prado's road manners highlight its limitations on more challenging roads and the fact that it has not been tuned for Australian roads. The Everest, on the other hand, well, that strikes a better balance between comfort and control, especially considering it was developed in Australia. Its suspension is firmer, offering a more composed ride that's better suited to high-speed handling. But it still remains compliant over bumps and potholes and keeps its body roll in check. And that gives the Everest a much more stable and planted feel when you are on a back road. The steering is another strength. It's much more direct and offers better feedback than the Prado, so you know where the car is at all times. And that makes the Everest feel a lot more smaller and a lot more nimble despite its pretty much same size. Now, both SUVs are great for covering longer distances, but their on-road personalities, they just differ so significantly. The Prado, it prioritizes a plush, relaxed experience, but falls very short when the roads demand a bit more agility and confidence. In contrast, the Everest offers a far more dynamic and composed drive that's better suited to Australia's varied road conditions. So if you value high-speed stability and precise handling, the Everest easily takes the win in this category. Now, when it comes to engine performance, the Ford Everest currently edges out the Toyota Prado, but there are nuances worth exploring, especially with changes on the horizon for Ford. The Prado's 2.8-litre turbo diesel engine now features the mild hybrid system, which gives it a modest boost at low speeds. You can feel the electric motor slightly. The 48-volt system provides some extra torque for smoother acceleration off the line and when crawling in traffic, but also to smoothen over gear changes, and it is a noticeable improvement over the previous generation. However, this assistance quickly fades at higher speeds, and the Prado starts to feel really out of its depth above 80 kilometers an hour. The engine, it lacks punch, making overtaking or merging onto highways a deliberate and somewhat sluggish affair. With a 0 to 100 of around 10.5 seconds, it's clear that this powertrain prioritizes efficiency over outright performance. And just because it is a mild hybrid does not make it automatically efficient. I was getting about the same that I was getting in the 150 Series Prado for fuel efficiency, about 10.1 liters per 100 kilometers. Just okay. The Ford Everest, at least in its current form, offers two stronger engine options. The 2-litre bi-turbo diesel is smooth and efficient, delivering a noticeable improvement in mid-range punch compared to the Prado. Its 0 to 100 time of 9.9 seconds may not sound groundbreaking, but in real-world conditions, it feels far more responsive and confident. Although driving it around, I get about 11 litres per 100 kilometers. For those looking for an even more capable engine though, and definitely my recommendation, the 3-litre V6 turbo diesel, it is just a revelation. With a 0 to 100 kilometer an hour time of just 8 seconds, it offers honestly effortless acceleration and refined power delivery, and that makes highway driving and overtaking honestly far less stressful. It's also quite efficient. You get about 11 liters per 100 kilometers, about the same as the 2-litre bi-turbo. Don't ask me why. However, there is a catch, because Ford has signaled plans to transition to a 2-litre bi-turbo diesel, but now with AdBlue for emissions compliance, of course, and we've seen that in the Ford Ranger Tremor, and it kinda sucked. This version cuts power to 150 kilowatt, which, while adequate, makes the Everest feel noticeably more lethargic compared to its current offerings. In fact, I got a 0 to 100 in about 14 seconds, which was not very good. To be fair, that was in the Ford Ranger Tremor, but still, I don't like that. In this upcoming configuration, the Prado's engine with its mild hybrid boost may actually feel more competitive and better than the AdBlue 2-litre bi-turbo, especially at low speeds, despite its limitations at higher speeds. In summary, the Everest in its current form dominates the Prado in terms of performance, particularly with the V6 option, offering a level of capability and refinement that's frankly hard to match. But as Ford moves to the AdBlue equipped 2-litre bi-turbo, Prado's engine could regain some ground, making it a closer contest for buyers prioritizing on-road performance. For now though, especially with the V6, the Everest remains the more dynamic and versatile choice, so the Everest wins here. Round 5. Practicality. Now, when it comes to boot space, the Toyota Landcruiser Prado, it just takes a shocking step backwards, and it then proceeds to take several more steps backwards, increasing its pace before eventually falling off a cliff and exploding into a ball of admittedly reliable flames. The 48-volt mild hybrid system forces a raised boot floor to accommodate the hybrid battery, and the result is a poorly thought out, compromised design. With all 3 rows up, you're left with just 182 liters of storage, barely enough for a couple of school bags or a small grocery haul. It's honestly laughable at a vehicle this size and price. Not to mention, they've just given you what looks like a Bunnings cheap flimsy bin, and that is your extra storage space. What is that? If you fold the 3rd row down, you now get 906 liters of capacity, which sounds decent until you realize the floor still eats into the vertical space. Bulkier items like a large suitcase or pram, they become awkward to load. You have to load them so high. Even with both the 2nd and 3rd rows folded, that offers apparently 1,829 liters of space, but the usability is so limited by the flat floor design and the height constraints imposed by the hybrid system. 5-seat variants fare slightly better, to be fair, with 954 liters behind the 2nd row, but the practicality still pales in comparison to competitors. Now, contrast that with the Ford Everest. Even with all 3 rows in place, it still gets 259 liters of space, which I didn't even think was very much, but it's like double that of the Prado. And it easily accommodates a few grocery bags or a small suitcase. You drop the 3rd row, you get a flat floor, and you get 898 liters of space, which on paper is technically not as much as a Toyota Prado, but every manufacturer measures it differently. So you could have completely different results for this same space, depending on the manufacturer. Still, you fold the 2nd row down, the Everest unlocks 1,823 liters of space, and that makes it pretty effortless to load bulky items from IKEA or even a weekend haul from Bunnings. Simply put, the Prado's boot space feels like an afterthought. It is hindered by outdated engineering decisions and compromises. Meanwhile, the Everest continues to prove it's been designed with actual families and real-world use in mind. If you're looking for an SUV that delivers on practicality, the Everest leaves the Prado in the dust. Everest wins here easily. Round 6, off-road. When it comes to off-road capability, the Toyota Landcruiser Prado and the Ford Everest, they each bring some pretty impressive credentials to the table, but there's still a clear winner here in terms of practicality and standard inclusions for off-road enthusiasts. Let's start with the basics. The Prado offers 210 millimeters of ground clearance on its lower trims, the GX and GXL, which does improve slightly to 221 millimeters on higher grades like the VX, Altitude, and Kakadu. In comparison, the Everest delivers 226 millimeters across most trims, providing a noticeable advantage for tackling uneven terrain without risking damage to the undercarriage of the vehicle. In terms of approach angles, the Prado edges out slightly with a 31 to 32 degrees depending on trim versus the Everest 30.2 degrees. However, the Prado falters with its 17-degree departure angle, which trails significantly behind the Everest 23 degrees. This makes the Prado more susceptible to scraping its rear bumper or ripping it off on steeper descents. Water crossings are another area where the Everest clearly shines with a best-in-class 800mm wading depth, while the Prado tops out at 700mm. Now, that 100mm of difference, it's not huge, but now that we know that water and the 48-volt mild hybrid system are literally incompatible with each other, yeah, it does make a difference. Here's where the Everest honestly really sets itself apart. As standard on all of its trims, it comes equipped with off-road driving modes, a rear-locking differential, an auto-locking center differential, and permanent four-wheel drive, except that is optional on the base Ambiente. This makes the Everest immediately more off-road ready without the need to jump to a higher spec model. The Prado, on the other hand, unfortunately makes you pay extra for essential off-road features. While a center locking differential is standard, you will need to upgrade to the 2nd most expensive trim, the Altitude, to access a rear locking differential and disconnecting sway bars for improved articulation, which isn't available on an Everest and would be a one-up. Off-road drive modes, which adjust the traction and stability systems for various terrains and could honestly take the place of the missing rear locking differential. Software has become very, very good. Well, they're only available on the Prado from the VX trim upwards, leaving the GX and GXL trims unnecessarily neutered by what is literally software they have already developed and could put in the car. It's honestly a frankly shitty approach, Toyota, so the Ford Everest is again a clear winner here. Round 7, value and pricing. Now, when it comes to pricing, the Toyota Prado, it starts at $72,500 for the GX and climbs to $99,990 for the Kakadu. They didn't want to have a $100,000 Prado, clearly. Key off-road features like a rear locking differential and sway bar disconnects are only available at the $92,700 Altitude, which means that you are paying top dollar for what many competitors include as standard. Add to that the cramped boot and third row compromises, and the value proposition becomes shaky at best. The Ford Everest, on the other hand, starts at $54,240 for the Ambiente and tops out at $81,200 for the Platinum. Even mid-range trims like the $67,040 Trend and $74,640 Sport V6 include features like permanent four-wheel drive, off-road drive modes, a more powerful and bigger engine, which is better for towing, and a better interior, all at significantly lower prices than comparable Prado models. And if you're going to try and use the reliability argument with me, it won't work. The only thing that will work for me is that Toyota does have a lot more dealers in Australia, though Ford still has plenty. Simply put, the Ford Everest offers more features, practicality, and comfort for less money. In this very instance, Toyota's premium pricing does not feel justified compared to the Everest's well-rounded offerings. So the winner here for value is obviously the Everest. Of course, what really matters is that you pay as little as possible no matter what new car you buy, which is why I created CarSauce Buy. All you need to do is Google CarSauce Buy, because we have a dedicated team of car buyers who are out there to negotiate on your behalf and get you the best deals on any new car. We have thousands of dealers who we make fight each other to get the best price possible, and best of all, it is a totally free service for you because we charge those dealers. It's a win-win for you and a lose-lose for the dealers. So if you want the best deals possible with zero obligation to you, no ongoing hassle, make sure you Google CarSauce Buy and my consumer advocate team will take care of you. All right, let's wrap this up in a bow. So I have spent a lot of time now driving the Landcruiser Prado and months driving the Ford Everest, and head to head across every key category, the results to me are just clear. While the Prado's legacy as a rugged, dependable family SUV still holds some weight, the compromises introduced in the 250 series, particularly its raised boot floor, cramped third row, and lackluster driving dynamics, they are just so hard to ignore. Toyota's premium pricing only amplifies these shortcomings, making it feel like buyers are just paying more for less. Honestly, I would recommend going out and buying a 150 series, not a 250 series. The Everest, on the other hand, it just emerges as a more modern and well-rounded SUV. It's better on-road manners, a more powerful and versatile engine lineup, superior practicality, and off-road readiness straight out of the box, all at a lower price point. Well, Ford has clearly designed the Everest with Australian families and lifestyles in mind, balancing rugged capability and everyday usability in a way that the Prado just no longer matches. So if you're choosing between these two, the Everest is the smarter, better value buy in almost every scenario. Unfortunately, Toyota's reputation is not enough to overcome the Prado's missteps in this instance. Do you agree with me? Let me know in the comment section below, which would you buy, the Prado or the Everest? Share this video with a friend, please do subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao for now.